things are about to get ugly. What if I told you that the very future of NATO could hinge on one place most Americans never think about? Greenland. This tiny island is suddenly the center of a geopolitical storm, and it's pushing the United States to a breaking point. You might think this is just about a place that's barely on anyone's radar since Trump's infamous Greenland purchase plan, but it's far bigger than that. We're talking about an alliance that's kept global stability for decades, and it's beginning to crack. Stay with me because what happens next could change the course of history, and it's not what you think. Now, you might be wondering, how did we get here? A group of U.S. senators, both Republicans and Democrats, took an unprecedented step. They sent a 10-member bipartisan delegation to Greenland. But this wasn't just about diplomacy. It was a forceful message. We've got your back, Greenland. But here's the twist. This wasn't just a diplomatic gesture. It was aimed at sending a loud and clear warning to Denmark and NATO about what's at stake. And yes, it's about Donald Trump, his threats, his style of diplomacy, and the backlash against it. But here's the real kicker. You won't believe who's standing against him in this high-stakes game. So what exactly happened when these U.S. senators set foot in Greenland? This wasn't just a typical diplomatic visit. This was a show of force, and it was clear. They weren't just visiting Greenland. They were making a statement. On one side, you have U.S. senators from both parties, Republicans and Democrats, standing together in unity. On the other side, you have the looming shadow of Donald Trump and his controversial threats to Greenland, Denmark, and NATO. These senators weren't just there for small talk. They made it crystal clear. If Trump moves on Greenland, they will do everything in their power to stop him. Now let's break it down. A delegation of 10 U.S. senators traveled to Greenland, sending a strong bipartisan message. They stood side by side with Greenlandic lawmakers and even the Prime Minister of Denmark, showing not just support, but solidarity. Here's where things get interesting. These lawmakers weren't just talking about a minor disagreement. They weren't just disagreeing with Trump's approach. They were warning him outright. They said it loud and clear. Any attempt to forcibly take Greenland, to threaten NATO, would not stand. In fact, they promised to go as far as impeachment and removal if the situation escalated. But here's what they didn't say outright. These threats to Greenland aren't just about Greenland. They're a dangerous power move, one that could destabilize NATO and shift the balance of power in the Arctic, one of the most contested regions in the world. Now, if you think this is just a political squabble, think again. The stakes here are much higher. One senator's warning sent a chill down everyone's spine. An American military takeover of Greenland would threaten NATO as we know it. Let that sink in. A direct threat to NATO, the very foundation of global security. And it's coming from the President of the United States. But here's where it gets even more alarming. Even short of a full-on invasion, simply suggesting that the U.S. might take Greenland by force would irreparably damage America's relationships with its closest allies. It's a ticking time bomb for American national security. And it plays right into the hands of the U.S.'s greatest adversaries, Russia and China. That's right. Putin and Xi Jinping are just waiting for NATO to fracture. What better way to destabilize the alliance than by creating division from within? But hold on, here's what nobody's saying out loud. These moves by Trump aren't just dangerous, they're also pointless. There's a treaty in place between the U.S. and Greenland that's been there for decades. If the U.S. wants military bases in Greenland, they've already got the permission. But instead of working with their allies, Trump is threatening them. Notice what's missing here? No one's asking the simple question, why escalate a situation that's already under control? It's not about the military. It's about something much more dangerous, ego, power, and influence. As the tension rises, it's impossible to ignore the bigger picture. This isn't just a diplomatic issue, it's a pattern, a dangerous game that's been building for years. Trump's threats to Greenland are not an isolated incident. This is part of a much larger strategy that's been taking shape, and it's becoming alarmingly familiar. Think back to the Cold War. Back then, the U.S. and Russia fought bitterly for control of the Arctic region. The stakes were the same: resources, power, and global influence. Now, in 2023, that same rivalry is alive and well, but this time it's not just Russia we're fighting against, it's China too. And that's exactly what's at risk here. If the U.S. pushes too hard, Greenland could end up caught in the middle. The island has been a strategic military location for decades. The U.S. once operated 17 bases there during the Cold War. Now, with tensions escalating between the superpowers, Greenland could once again become the flashpoint for a global showdown. But here's the part no one's talking about. By threatening Greenland, Trump isn't just putting NATO in danger, he's normalizing this kind of reckless unilateral action. Think about it. When did it become acceptable for a president to casually threaten a military invasion of an ally? This is a dangerous precedent, one that could set the stage for more aggressive moves down the road. And here's why that should terrify you. If this goes unchecked, the world could face a new kind of geopolitical chaos, a world where alliances don't mean what they used to, a world where might makes right and trust is in short supply. And just when you think things couldn't get worse, they do. The evidence starts piling up, and it's undeniable. Trump's threats are more than just bluster. They're a serious risk to international stability. Take Senator Shaheen's words, for instance. The suggestion that the U.S. would take Greenland by force does real damage not just to the relationship with Greenland and Denmark, but to America's own national security. Those words are chilling. Shaheen isn't just talking about hurt feelings. She's talking about a real, lasting fracture in global alliances. What she's saying is this: the more Trump pushes, the more he puts America's credibility on the line. And the worst part, it's entirely unnecessary. Here's where it gets even more disturbing. While Trump is threatening Greenland, the very countries he's alienating are offering the U.S. an olive branch. Denmark and Greenland have made it crystal clear. If the U.S. wants to develop military bases, work on critical minerals, or cooperate in the Arctic, they're open to it. No threats, no drama. Just mutual cooperation. But instead of seizing that opportunity, Trump is doubling down on aggression. And here's the kicker. This isn't just an ideological battle, it's a strategic blunder. By picking a fight with Greenland, Trump is risking America's position in the Arctic at a time when Russia and China are eyeing the region with growing interest. Now, here's why this changes everything. By creating this crisis, Trump is forcing the U.S. into a corner. He's pushing NATO allies away, destabilizing the Arctic, and giving Russia exactly what it wants: a fractured, distracted NATO. The situation is escalating rapidly, and now the dominoes are starting to fall. Just this week, the tension reached a boiling point. While Trump is still fixated on Greenland, a series of related events began stacking up one after another. First, we see American lawmakers from both parties intensifying their efforts to protect NATO and safeguard U.S. relationships with its allies. They're not just talking anymore. They're actively pushing back against Trump's reckless rhetoric. And while they're doing that, they're not just sending messages to Trump, they're sending a message to the world. We are not divided. Then the stakes get even higher. While Trump's actions are pushing allies away, the U.S. is also facing a growing international backlash. European countries are now sending special forces to Greenland to protect it from potential U.S. aggression. That's right. NATO allies are taking matters into their own hands to ensure Greenland's sovereignty remains intact. What does this mean if it continues? The scenario is clear. The world's most powerful alliance could be torn apart from the inside. NATO was built on trust and mutual cooperation. But with Trump's reckless moves, that trust is starting to fray, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Now let's zoom out for a moment. You're probably asking, what does this mean for you? How does this geopolitical drama playing out thousands of miles away affect ordinary people, people like you? Well, here's the truth. What's happening in Greenland with NATO and with the U.S.'s global role, it affects you. Whether you realize it or not, every action in the international arena has a ripple effect that can reach your doorstep. You don't need to be a political expert to understand this. The way nations interact, the deals they make, the alliances they form, all of this shapes the world you live in. And if NATO begins to fracture, if trust between allies starts to erode, it could lead to instability. Think about it. If the world's strongest military alliance is weakened, how safe do you feel knowing that tensions could spill over into real-world conflicts? This isn't some far-off hypothetical. It's happening right now. And when leaders like Senator Shaheen warn about the damage to America's security, they're talking about you. They're talking about the very real risk of a world that's less stable, more fragmented, and filled with uncertainty. And if you think this doesn't matter to your everyday life, think again. The economy, national security, and even the price of goods all rely on the stability that NATO has provided for decades. If this trust falls apart, it will affect everything from your safety to your wallet. If this sounds familiar, if you're starting to see the pattern, it's because the global balance is shifting, and this time it might not be in our favor. Here's where we need to take a step back and look at the system behind all of this, the invisible forces that allow these events to unfold the way they do. It's not just about a single leader's decisions or a random geopolitical squabble. This is about the systems of power, leverage, and fear that enable these moves to take place. What's happening with Greenland isn't some spontaneous outburst. It's a consequence of a larger system where national interests and global power dynamics constantly collide. NATO wasn't just built to defend borders. It was built to keep balance. And when that balance is disturbed, it sends shockwaves across the world. So let's talk about leverage. Trump's approach isn't about diplomacy, it's about power. His threats aren't just about Greenland, they're about asserting dominance on the world stage, and the consequences of this kind of brinkmanship are clear. Alienation, instability, and a fragmented world where the rules no longer apply. This is where it gets unsettling. By playing this game of high-stakes international poker, Trump isn't just taking on Greenland, he's taking on the very idea of global cooperation. NATO was built on trust, on shared principles, but now it's becoming a bargaining chip in someone's personal agenda. And this isn't just reckless, it's dangerous. Here's the insight that should make you uneasy. In a world where power trumps diplomacy, alliances mean less, and the global order could collapse with a single decision. Trump's move isn't just shaking up Greenland. It's shaking the foundation of the system that has kept the peace for decades. So what happens next? This is where the future of global diplomacy gets uncertain and the stakes couldn't be higher. There are two possible paths forward, and neither of them looks good. On one hand, we could see NATO hold strong. The senators, the diplomats, the military, everyone could rally together, putting enough pressure on Trump to back down. A diplomatic resolution might be reached, and the world breathes a collective sigh of relief. Greenland stays safe, NATO remains intact, and the world continues on, despite the cracks that have already formed. But here's the other scenario. Things get worse. If Trump doubles down, if the U.S. continues to push for control over Greenland, the alliance could fracture irreparably. This is the nightmare scenario for NATO, the U.S., and the global community. And if that happens, the entire balance of power shifts. Russia and China are already watching closely, waiting for any sign of weakness. A divided NATO would be exactly what they need to expand their influence, not just in the Arctic, but across Europe and beyond. And here's why the uncertainty is so dangerous. Both of these paths have momentum. We're at a tipping point, and which direction we go in depends on what happens next. The next move is already forming, whether it's a peaceful resolution or a full-blown geopolitical crisis. But one thing is certain. The world is watching, and this story is far from over. Now, let me leave you with one crucial insight. It's not just about Greenland. It never was. This entire situation is a microcosm of a much bigger power struggle, one that involves the future of global alliances, the balance of power, and the very concept of trust between nations. If this moment is any indication, the world is on the verge of a new era, one where diplomacy isn't guaranteed, where alliances are no longer solid, and where power is dictated by who can take the most risks. If we don't get a handle on this, the damage could be irreversible. And that's why this matters to you. The future of global security, trade, and even your day-to-day life could hinge on what happens next. This isn't just politics. It's real. It's happening right now. And it's affecting us all. The next chapter of this story is already unfolding. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. If you found this analysis eye-opening, make sure to follow for more in-depth breakdowns of the issues that matter most. Stay tuned, because the world is changing, and you need to know why.